only 3 women in 120 years of cinema, Jane Campion, Chloe Zhao, and Kathryn Bigalow, have won the Academy Award for Best Director. Long before this astonishing conquest of Hollywood misogyny, Tinseltown had a much more equal beginning. At the birth of cinema, women worked in all aspects of the filmmaking process. Half of the silent films produced were written by prolific female storytellers such as Frances Marion. Mega performers like Mary Pickford established much of the modern studio system we know today. Of all the pioneering women at the birth of cinema, one stands out as the first American cinema auteur. Florence Lois Weber, known professionally as Lois Weber. She will produce, write, edit, camera operate, talent scout, direct, theater manage, studio head, production design, as well as create her own original content. She is the first person in cinema to pioneer the split screen, point of view shots, extreme close-ups, car chase action sequences, elaborate tracking shots, as well as the first person to be nationally censored in America, multiple times. One of the first storytellers to tackle social issues gripping America, such as birth control, anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, toxic wealth, alcoholism, and opium addiction. Weber was the first woman to direct a full feature film, the first mayor of Universal City, and the first woman to own and run her own studio. A formidable American icon, Lois Weber was involved in 400 films at the foundation of cinema, long before any other man, and none even comes close to her accomplishments. Florence Lois Weber was born on June 13, 1879, in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. She exhibited prodigy talents at an early age as a concert pianist, before moving to New York in 1904 to pursue a career in entertainment. The same year, she joined an acting troupe, where she met her first husband and collaborator, Wendell Phillips Smalley, the leading man and manager of the theater company. Just before her 25th birthday, Weber and Smalley married on April 29, 1904, in Chicago, Illinois. In 1910, the power couple shifted gears from theater to the newly booming motion picture industry, working on dozens of short films for various production companies throughout New York. In 1911, Weber acted in and directed her first silent short film, A Heroine of 76. By 1913, Weber and Smalley had written, produced, and directed dozens of short films, along with her breakout film, Suspense. The story of a woman home alone when an unwelcome intruder threatens her very life. The film was a massive success, setting up a controversial first, The Jews' Christmas, the first positive Semitic film of a family dealing with assimilation when a Jewish woman marries a Gentile. Intermarriage in cinema brought controversy in 1913 America, as well as national attention, which contributed to box office success. In 1915, Weber wrote, directed, and starred in a film called Hypocrites, about the hypocrisy of toxic masculine institutions and the oppression of femininity. When a priest contemplates the fall from grace, he dreams of medieval times, unveiling a nude statue. It was the female form that is to blame for all of society's ills, hence why it must always be hidden and controlled. Featuring Margaret Edwards, the first fully nude female performer in the story of cinema. Not surprisingly, riots broke out in New York City, the film was banned in Ohio, and was subjected to Catholic censorship in Boston. Again, free national press and publicity contributed to another box office hit. Universal Film Manufacturing Company will absorb Weber's film and acquisitions. The merger will bring Weber and Smalley to Los Angeles, California, to head up a subsidiary of the studio. Universal City was incorporated in 1913, with Lois Weber as its first elected mayor, and Laura Oakley, famed gunslinger, as first police chief. The mostly all-female city council was the first for the nation. In 1914, Lois Weber was the first American woman to direct a feature-length film and became the first general manager of a film studio, working for Julia Crawford Ivers at the Bosworth Company for an astonishing $50,000 a year contract. By 1915, Weber was as famous as D.W. Griffith and Cecil B. DeMille, equally paid and making equally groundbreaking contributions to cinema. In 1915, the Supreme Court of the United States decreed that films did not constitute free speech, followed immediately by a ruling of the New York Court of Appeals that a film on family planning may be censored in the interest of morality, decency, and public safety and welfare. The censorship actually worked to fuel interest in Weber's films, which dealt with those very same topics. Starting with Where Are My Children, 1916, the story of an uptight district attorney in a legal case about an abortion doctor. The witness reveals the attorney's own friends saw the doctor for an abortion. The film was a massive success, with an estimated gross of $3 million in a time when ticket prices were 50 cents. Shoes, 1916, about a woman who cares for her 5 family members and cannot afford a new pair of shoes, and so she sells her virginity for a new pair. Weber's last screen appearance was in The People vs. John Doe, 1916, a true story of a trial dealing with capital punishment based on circumstantial evidence. Written and directed by Weber, she takes aim at corrupt law enforcement and their treatment of the mentally ill. Hop, The Devil's Brew, 1916, deals with alcoholism and opium addiction. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, 1917, inspired by the trial of Margaret Sanger, the outspoken female reproductive rights activist and founder of the organization that will come to be known as Planned Parenthood Federation of America. A run of films that would be jarring to American movie-going audiences today. By June 1917, Weber became the first American female director to establish and run her own movie studio, Lois Weber Productions, financed in part by Universal. With Smalley running the studio, the power couple moved on to the studio lot. In 1921, Weber directed what is considered by many today her masterpiece and most successful film, The Blot. The story of a rich bachelor who attempts to court a working librarian in a privileged private institution. When she falls ill and the family cannot care for her and resort to theft, the bachelor swoops in to save the day. Not just with food, but when he learns her father works for his rich father, he gets the department a raise. As the wealthy family would not want a blot on their good name. The film takes a hard look at the working poor, similar to many American families today. Unfortunately for Weber, the following years would prove to be trying. The Jazz Age, the Flapper Girl, along with cinema's obsession with wealth, capitalism, frivolity, and fantasy, disgusted Weber. She would fall out of popular favor, accused of being preachy, out of touch, and irrelevant. In June of 1922, Weber and Smalley secretly divorced. His alcoholism, abuse, and womanizing had become too much. Weber will work once again for Carl Laemmle at Universal in story development. Within 1 year, 1926, she signed a distribution deal, making her one of the highest-paid women in the cinema business. The same year, Weber returned to the director chair in Topsy and Eva, a comedy featuring the Duncan sisters, in blackface. Feeling the scenes were too insulting toward African Americans and denouncing its racist humor, Lois was replaced by Del Lord, who was consulted by Birth of a Nation director D.W. Griffith. On June 30th, 1926, Weber would remarry at the home of screenwriter and longtime friend Frances Marion in Santa Ana, California. Her husband, Captain Harry Gantz, a wealthy orange rancher, was said to be an opportunist who took control of her finances. Lois worked for both United Artists as a script doctor and Universal as a talent scout and screen test director. Lois's last film was a low-budget independent film that came by chance when she and Gantz spent 5 weeks in Hawaii. The first film to be shot on Kauai, the story of a Hawaiian sugar plantation owner bothered by white men marrying indigenous women, until he falls in love and marries one. The romance is short-lived. When the plantation owner travels stateside, he marries a socialite's daughter, who moves into the plantation with him, making his first Hawaiian wife their servant. The film was shown on television on Friday, June 21, 1940 on NBC, and is now considered a lost film. Weber divorced Gantz in 1935 and passed away in Santa Monica, California in 1939 from a bleeding ulcer. By the 1930s, men dominated cinema and would remain so even today. In 2020, women directors accounted for only 17% of the top 250 films made. Only 3 women have been recognized as Best Director by the Academy of Motion Pictures. The first was Kathryn Bigalow in 2008, only about 100 years after the most prolific and accomplished woman in motion picture history, Lois Weber, one of America's great cinema founders.